There we go. Welcome in, everybody. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's story time. I'm adjusting my yes, it's Wednesday, and we're back to reading A Warrior Heart this week, starting with chapter 16 this evening. And I don't know about you, but I am actually glad we are in the story because it's settling down just a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm messing with the camera. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. I promise I have been drinking water today, contrary to appearances. I also have a new camera, so the lighting might be a little weird. I am actually working on that, so just bear with me as I deal with that in the next couple of streams. And I should hopefully have another cool thing to add to my stream setup here in a week or two. I'm just trying to get some stuff sorted out on the actual setup side. As I mentioned in a previous stream, I was in the process of getting an Elgato prompter, which is something for me that would be really useful, especially for streams like this where I'm reading and staring at the screen a whole bunch, so that I don't have to scroll as much. If I can get it working correctly, it should auto scroll as I'm reading out loud, which would be really, really helpful, so I don't have to sit there and scroll with the mouse. It would mean that I'm not looking down as I'm reading. I'd actually be looking at the camera. So I'm super excited about that. Can't wait to get it integrated into my streaming setup. Glad to see anybody who's here. I haven't taken a look in chat today. Welcome to everybody who's here, whether you're here in chat or lurking and listening. I appreciate you, and I'm glad you're here. And I hope that these chapters are a bit less chaotic for us this week. Last couple of times I was reading, which was Sunday before last, and Wednesday, which I think would have been the 2nd and the 6th, something like that. Content was a little heavy, but it was necessary for the story. We got through it. So we are doing something a little bit less chaotic this week. We're starting off this evening with chapter 16 of A Warrior's Heart. Give me just a second while I change something. Yeah, I'm still messing with color temperature and things like that, so just bear with me a little bit. Still getting things sorted. I'm glad to see each and every one of you this evening, and I hope that you're staying cool, staying hydrated. It is quite warm up this way. It was about 90 degrees when I got home from work today, and I almost immediately turned into a puddle. Almost. So I hope that you guys are staying cool and staying hydrated while you're hanging out with me. Do let me know if sound levels are good. Like I said, I'm rearranging things in my setup, so knobs may have gotten bumped. So please do let me know if you're having trouble hearing me. Alright. I promise I do have a voice tonight. I promise I do. I'm messing with my lighting just a little bit. That's a little better. Maybe? All right. As I said, we are diving back into A Warrior's Heart this evening, starting with chapter 16. Chapter 16. The lamp on the far table cast long, warm shadows across the room, the kind of light that hummed gently in the silence. Outside, the wind had stilled. Even the pines were quiet. Maren stirred. Her breath hitched before her eyes even opened, her brow furrowed. Not in fear this time, but pain. Real. Present. Grounded. She didn't cry out. She just drew a slow breath and blinked against the fuzz of sleep as her senses returned one at a time. She didn't have to ask where she was. She knew. And she wasn't alone. Callista sat beside her, her braid tucked behind one shoulder, her tunic sleeves rolled up, her posture casual, but her eyes never left Maren's face. Jared leaned against the wall near the door, his arms crossed but not withdrawn, watching. Ethan stood at the foot of the bed, unmoving, but his weight in the room was unmistakable. Maren tried to speak. It came out rough. "You're all still here?" Callista smiled gently. "Where else would we be?" "You didn't have to." "You don't get to finish that sentence," Ethan cut in, his voice low but firm. "Not after what happened." Maren looked away. Her throat tightened. Give me just 1 second, guys. Oh, song changed. Callista shifted closer and took her hand. "You're allowed to need people, Maren. You're allowed to fall. The trick is not doing it alone." Maren exhaled slowly, her voice raspy. "I keep trying to carry it. All of it. Him, Delan, Bestine, Coruscant, my name." Her breath hitched on the word Bestine. "You're not a vessel for ghosts," Jared said softly. Her blue eyes flicked to him. "Sometimes I feel like I am." "You're more than what they did to you," he continued. "You're still you." She hesitated and then turned her head slightly. "I heard you in the forest, just before I blacked out." Ethan stepped forward, his voice quieter. "We were there. You weren't alone. And next time, if there's ever a next time, you wait. You call us. I don't care if you think you're strong enough. I will drag you home again if I have to." "Understood," she murmured. He stared at her for a long moment, and then gave a single nod and stepped back. Callista's hand didn't leave hers. "You terrified us." "I terrified myself," she whispered. Jared stepped forward again. "Then let us be the ground you stand on while you remember who you are." She closed her eyes. Let the words settle. Let the presence around her hold. Finally, after a long pause, she said, "The pain's coming back." "Then we'll manage it together," Callista said. "I've got a secondary dose prepped. Nothing too strong." "I don't want to sleep again." "You won't. Just enough to take the edge off." She stood, walked quietly to the cabinet, and prepared the injector. Jared knelt beside Maren, his hand resting lightly on her arm. "We're not going anywhere." She nodded, her eyes damp, but not broken. "I keep trying to prove I'm more than what they made me." "You are," he said, "but you don't have to prove it." "I don't know how to stop." "We'll help you learn." Callista returned, pressing the injector gently to Maren's neck. "You're not weak for needing rest," she said. "I know," Maren whispered, "but it still feels like failure." "It's not," Callista said firmly. "It's healing." The dose took hold slowly, easing the tremor in Maren's limbs. Her breathing evened, her hands relaxed. Ethan stood at the doorway now, watching them, watching her and something in him finally softened. "I've never been more proud of you," he said, "but I'll be damned if I ever let you fall like that again." Marin turned her head just enough to look at him. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be. Just stay. That's all I ask." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Durza Estate, lower hall, near midnight. The corridor below the main level was dim and cool, carved from the same stone as the mountain itself. Aran had never been here before, not past the main living quarter. But he knew how to move without being seen, even now. Old habits died harder than most. He didn't sneak. Not really. But he arrived without noise, pausing just outside the open doorway to the old shrine. Inside, soft candlelight flickered against unpolished stone walls. Stone floors, aged and warm beneath the dim glow, absorbed sound and presence alike. There was no altar, no banners, just a carved recess in the far wall. A statue. Presence. And a small shelf, low and almost hidden in the shadow. Curious Durza's helmet rested there, torched and cracked across the left side, fervently cleaned but never restored, still bearing the ash of Galan's last breath. Jared was already there, seated cross-legged in front of the statue. He didn't look up. "I figured you'd come eventually," he said, his voice quiet. Aran stepped forward, pausing a few feet away. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't." Jared looked over his shoulder. "Did he ever tell you what this was?" "He mentioned it. Once." Jared gestured for him to sit. Aran hesitated, and then he did. For a long moment, neither spoke. The helmet gleamed dully in the candlelight, matte, blackened, and silent. "She doesn't come down here often," Jared said eventually. "Says it hurts too much, but she keeps it because it's part of her." Aran's eyes stayed fixed on the helmet across the room. "I didn't know him, not beyond what Kirit Saad had told me anyway." "I did," Jared said. "Not like Ethan, but enough to know what she lost." "Did he fight like her?" "No," Jared said. "She fights like him." That landed. Jared leaned back on his palms, sighing. He was quiet, grounded, thoughtful in ways that made Ethan crazy. He never raised his voice, but when he gave orders, everyone listened. Aran nodded slowly. "That explains some things." They fell silent again, and then Aran said, "She's not okay, even if she says she is." "No, but she's not falling, either. Not yet." "I know what it looks like when someone's on the edge," Aran said. "I used to push people there for a living." Jared looked at him. The gaze measured. "You were different too when we pulled her out." Aran didn't deny it. He reached up, touching the back of his neck as if remembering an old weight. "No, it wasn't supposed to be there." "I gathered. She was the one who taught me how to dislocate a shoulder without shattering the joint," Aran said, his tone distant. "The same hold Marin used on me the first time we sparred." Jared raised an eyebrow. "You let her use it on you?" "No," Aran said. "She figured it out. I just recognized the rhythm." There was a long pause. And then Aran asked, "How long do you think she'll keep pushing like this?" Jared didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted back to the helmet. "She wants to be whole," he said. "But every time she tries to rebuild, someone tears another piece away. And instead of stopping, she adds it to her armor." Aran looked down. "Eventually, that weight collapses. Not if we're there to carry it." Another beat of silence passed before Aran asked, almost too quietly, "Would she forgive me if I broke again?" Jared looked at him sharply. And then he said, "She already has. She just hasn't told you yet." They sat there in the candlelight, two soldiers from very different pasts, facing the same truth. She was their anchor, and they were hers, even if none of them were ready for what came next. Need some water before I lose my voice. Don't need that. There's a lot of male voices in this story, so please excuse me if I start wrecking my voice. I can already kind of hear it a little bit. There's the estate, the north balcony. 5 nights later, the stars were out. Pale light scattered over the mountainside like dust on armor, cool and quiet. The night air was crisp, brushing softly through the pine-laced wind. Marin sat propped up on a padded bench, a blanket tucked over her braced legs. She was still recovering. She still couldn't stand, but Callista had insisted on fresh air, and Marin hadn't argued. Not this time, anyway. Jared had carried her there and then withdrew. Aran stood a few meters away, leaning against the stone railing, his arms crossed loosely. His vambraces were off and his sleeves were rolled back. He wasn't armored. Not armed, just present. They'd been quiet for a while. Marin finally spoke. I keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't gone out there. If I'd stayed. Aran didn't look at her right away. You'd still be hurting. Just be quieter about it. She glanced at him. And that's better? No, he said, but it would have looked more acceptable. She gave a small, bitter laugh. I hate how easily that makes sense. He turned then, looking at her fully. You're not wrong for needing to prove you're still whole. Marin studied him closely. But you already are, he said. You've been whole since the day you spared me. You just don't believe it yet. Her expression flickered, guarded and uncertain. Why do you care? He didn't answer right away. When he did, it was quieter than she expected. Because I saw what the Kurtzad wanted to make you into, he said. A symbol, a warning, a name people whispered in fear. The girl who survived, the Jetty who couldn't break. Marin looked away. I'm not unbreakable. I know, he said. That's why you scare me. She blinked at him, confused. What? He stepped forward just a little into the glow of the low lantern. You feel everything. You carry it. You own it. And still you get back up. That's not a strength they taught us to respect. That's something else. She was silent now. He took another slow step closer. When I came to you, I didn't expect mercy. I didn't want it. I was looking for an ending. Marin's throat tightened. But you didn't give me one. You gave me a choice instead. Her eyes met his. And I care, he said, his voice steady now, because no one else ever did. Not like you do. Not the way you look at people and see them, even when they've done things they shouldn't have survived. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full of the things she hadn't let herself feel and the things he'd never said aloud. Marin's voice, when it came, was softer than a whisper. I didn't know if you'd stay. I didn't either, he said, but I'm still here. There was a pause. I'm not leaving, he added. Not unless you tell me to. She didn't. Instead, after a long breath, she said, Can you stay a while? He nodded, no hesitation, and without another word, he sat beside her on the bench, close, but not quite touching, just enough to share the silence. Enough to make it feel like peace. Northern Ridge. Bunker approach. The trees were thick with fog again. Early light filtered through in pale gray streaks, casting the mountainside in shadowed silence. Ethan moved ahead with purpose, his steps sharp but quiet. Aran walked beside him, silent for most of the climb. His armor was lighter this time. No helmet, no rifle. Just his knife strapped to his thigh and the tension in his jaw. Neither man had spoken much since they left the estate. It wasn't avoidance, it was restraint. The bunker doors slid open slowly at their approach, the hydraulics releasing with a low groan. Ethan keyed in the entry code and the thick steel door slid wide. They stepped into the cold stone corridor beyond. The same scent lingered. Old air, coolant, carbon scoring from half-repaired wall seams. The place where Iran had once been held, where Noul now waited. Neither man needed to speak to know the rhythm of this place. They reached the cell inside. Noel was sitting cross-legged again, the same position as before. She looked up the moment the force field whined at their approach. Her expression didn't change. Ren stepped forward first, his arms folded. Oops, sorry, 1 second. Ethan remained just behind, flanking to the side like a wall waiting to move. Noel's voice was quiet. No armed guards this time. We're enough, Ethan said flatly. She didn't argue. You've been quiet, Aran said, his tone unreadable. I've nothing to say, he replied. You watched them nearly break her. You didn't touch her, but you didn't stop them, Ethan growled, and you know exactly who she was. Noel finally looked up. Really looked at Ethan and then at Aran. She wasn't supposed to walk into it alone, she said. We were told the Jetty was already dead. She almost was, Ethan said, flatly. That was the idea. And now? Noel asked. Now, Aran said. You're going to start talking, because the Kirtsad aren't done, and Marin's not the only one they're targeting. Noel's mouth tightened. You think I still matter to them? I think you know what they've been doing since Bevan's takeover, Ethan said. I think you've seen what the remnants have turned into, and I think you've been waiting for someone to ask. She didn't answer. Aran stepped forward, stopping just inches from the force field. I want to believe there's still something in you that remembers what we fought for before it turned into a graveyard, he said. So this is your chance. Tell us what's coming, or we leave you here to rot in silence. There was a long pause. Then Noel stood slowly, her hands relaxed at her sides. You want to know what's coming? Ethan and Aran both watched her carefully. She stepped closer to the barrier, her voice low. And she said one word. Korriban. Aran blinked. Ethan's face shifted. What about it? The remnants, Noel said. They're not just regrouping, they're being guided, pulled into something older, deeper. The kind of cause Bevan only thought he understood. The kind that doesn't need armies to win. Ethan stepped forward, his voice razor sharp. Who's guiding them? But Noel only looked at Aran, not with defiance, but in warning. You're not done with this war, he said, and neither is she. Infirmary, mid-afternoon. The sun slanted low through the upper shutters, catching in the quiet dust of the room beyond. Faint breeze stirred the curtains, pine-scented and cool. The world outside moved on. Inside, Marin sat propped higher than before. Her legs still braced, the pain dull but persistent. A datapad rested beside her untouched. She wasn't reading. She was waiting. When Ethan entered, the door barely made a sound. He paused in the doorway, his eyes scanning her face before he spoke. You're sitting up higher than Callista said you should. Marin gave a faint smirk. Don't tell her. He raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Instead, he crossed the room and took the seat beside the bed. Arms rested on his knees. You feeling better? He asked. Physically? A little. Her smile faded. Mentally? I feel like I've been stuffed into a box and told not to kick the walls. You were stuffed into a bed and told not to walk, Ethan said dryly. I know, and I'm listening, but you're still Marin, he finished. She nodded and then looked down, her fingers picking idly at the blanket. I've been thinking, she said after a moment, about Aran and the colony. Ethan blinked. What about them? I know Aaron offered him a position. Training, quiet support. It was never formal, but he offered it. He looked back up. I think Aran should go. Ethan frowned, tilting his head slightly. You want him gone? No, she said quickly. Not like that. I think if he's going to stay here and really wants to build something instead of just waiting to fight, then he should follow through on that agreement. Even if I can't. Ethan leaned back, watching her closely. He told you he's not leaving. I know, she said, quieter. That's why I think he should. Not leave, just step forward into something that's his, and not just mine. Ethan was quiet for a long time, and then, you trust him. She met his gaze. I do, and you're not ready to be around him every day. Not yet. No, she whispered, but that's not his fault. Ethan leaned back in the chair, letting that sit for a moment. His voice was soft when he spoke again. You're not weak for saying that. I feel like I am. You're not, he said. You're healing, and you're still trying to make space for someone else while doing it. That's the opposite of weakness. Marin looked away. Can you tell him? I'm going to stop right there, because we are about to be in an ad. I will see you guys in a minute and a half. Go get some water, have a stretch, go walk around a bit. See you in a minute. Alright, we are back. Thanks for hanging out through the ad, guys. I really appreciate it. I know they're not the most fun things to deal with, but unfortunately, they're just part of being on Twitch. I appreciate every one of you for being here. Let's jump back in. Marin looked away. Can you tell him? Ethan exhaled slowly. You really think he'd say no to you? I'm afraid he'll say yes just because I asked. Ethan nodded slowly. Then I'll ask. Frame it as my call. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Marin's mouth. That would help. He stood, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You'll be okay here for a few hours? Jared's around, she said. Callista, too. I'm not exactly moving fast. You'll get there. And for the first time since the clearing, Marin believed him. Upper walkway. Early evening. The sun had dipped low over the pines, casting long shadows across the northern face of the estate. The mountain air held its usual bite, but tonight it was tempered by gold, the kind of warmth that reminded Aran of something long before battle. He stood alone on the upper balcony, his hand resting on the stone railing. Below, the trail to the southern colony stretched just beyond his sight. He could hear the wind pushing through the branches and the low thrum of a distant generator. He hadn't slept the night before. Even with Marin safe, even after her voice had steadied and her hand had reached for his, there was a gnawing edge inside him. Not doubt, not guilt. Something else. What now? That was the question he couldn't shake. He'd follow her into fire, fight beside her. He'd surrendered to her. Now she was still, healing and resting, and he felt like a weapon without a target. He'd been trained to fight, to hunt, to survive, not to stand in stillness and wait, not to belong. Something about that colony, the way Aaron had looked at him, not with suspicion but expectation, that had stayed with him. The idea that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to be waiting for the next war. Just as the wind picked up, footsteps echoed behind him. Ethan. Of course. The older man stopped a few meters away, arms folded loosely across his chest, his gaze sharp but unreadable. Marin's asking, he said, without preamble. Aran turned his head slightly. What about? The colony, Ethan said. Your agreement with Aaron. Aran's brow furrowed. She wants me to go? She wants you to step into what you've started, Ethan clarified. Not leave. Just move forward. Aran turned back to the trees, thinking. She said that? She did. Her words were careful, but the meaning was clear. She doesn't want to hold you back. Even now. Aran exhaled slowly. I thought she wasn't ready to be near me yet. She's not, Ethan said. Not every hour, not every breath, but she wants to be. That matters. Aran didn't speak for a long time, and then quietly, if I go, it won't feel like a retreat? No, Ethan said. It'll feel like you're building something she can come back to, on her terms. The words struck deeper than Aran let show. She said you should be free to choose, Ethan added, so I'm not giving you an order, I'm just giving you the truth. Aran nodded slowly, still watching the trees beyond. Tell her I'll go, and tell Aaron I'll take the job. Ethan gave him a long look. I'll tell them both, he said. He turned and walked away, his boots quiet against the stone. Aran remained where he was, alone in the dusk, feeling, not drifting, but grounded. The Northern Ridge bunker, the next morning. The door sighed open once again, just like always. Cold air met warmer breath as Ethan keyed in the code and stepped through first, Aran a step behind. The dim hallway beyond hadn't changed. Neither had the hum of the force fields, but Noel had. She was awake this time, sitting not in shadow, but just inside the light's edge. Her wrists resting against her knees, her posture relaxed, but her gaze was sharp, alert, watching. She didn't flinch when the two men entered. Ethan stopped in front of the control panel, his arms folded. Aran moved closer. No armor, just a dark tunic and the weariness of a man who hadn't fully decided whether this was a rescue or a sentencing. They stood in silence for a moment, and then Noel spoke quietly. You came back, Ethan grunted. We're consistent, if nothing else. Aran didn't answer. Noel looked at him directly. I told you what I knew about Korriban, about the shift in the chain of command. There's more coming. There's always more, Ethan said coldly. That's not the question. She looked back at Aran, and this time her voice was softer, more careful. She said, You want to know if I'll follow you? Aran's jaw tightened. I want to know if I can. Noel lowered her gaze. I don't know, she admitted. I believed in something once, and then I watched it rot from the inside. Bevan's rise, the Sith involvement, the orders I followed. She paused. I've spent a long time convincing myself I was still a soldier, not a servant. You were both, Aran said flatly. She nodded once. I know, but if you're asking if I'll betray you again, if I'd hand you over or disappear if you gave me a weapon, no, I wouldn't. Ethan stepped in closer, his eyes narrowed. Why not? Because there's no cause left, she said. Just survivors, and you're the only ones I've met who are trying to build something instead of burning it down. She looked back at Aran. I don't want redemption, she said. I want a place I don't have to lie about what I've done, where I can be useful, where I can choose. Ethan didn't speak. He looked at Aran, and this time Aran stepped closer. No, he said carefully. If I bring you to the colony, it won't be under a banner. You'll follow their rules, train their people, help build what I couldn't. And if I can't? He asked. Then I put you back in the cell, and I walk away. Noel looked him in the eyes, and after a long moment, he nodded. Then let me try. Ethan walked beside Aran in silence for several paces, the trees hissing softly overhead. Finally, he spoke. You really think she's telling the truth? Aran exhaled slowly. I think she's lost, and I know what that looks like. You trust her? No, Aran said honestly, but I trust what she wants. Ethan grunted. And what's that? A chance to stop running. They reached the edge of the tree line. The path to the southern colony stretched out ahead, winding and quiet. Ethan looked at him sideways. You'll keep her on a short leash. I don't keep people on leashes, Aran said. That's what they did. Ethan smiled faintly. You're learning. Not a good teacher, Aran replied, and then he added, quietly, just doesn't know she is. The Southern Trail, midday. The walk was silent. Not the kind of silence that choked, but the kind that lingered like fog. Cool, heavy, and full of meaning unspoken. Aran didn't speak much on the way down from the ridge. He walked a half step ahead as if by instinct, his eyes constantly scanning the trail, one hand resting near the knife at his hip. Not to threaten her, but to remind them both of who they had been. Noel said nothing either. She walked without binders, but not without consequence. Her shoulders were stiff, her pace measured. She wore no helmet, no armor, just a gray tunic borrowed from the estate and a utility belt devoid of weapons. She looked like a ghost of the war that had passed through these woods. And maybe she was. The pine trees slowly gave way to older, broader growth. The wind warmed, the ground softened under their boots. Then stone turned to dirt, and dirt gave way to the outer markers of the colony perimeter. They were seen long before they reached the gate. The guards were waiting. 2 Marines in light armor, 2 settlers with blaster carbines slung across their backs. No one aimed, but no one looked relaxed either. Aran stepped forward. It's me. And she's not in custody. The lead sentry, a tall woman with gray streaks in her braids, studied Noel for a long moment before giving a sharp nod. The administrators inside. They let him pass, but no one stopped watching. Aaron stood just where he had the first time, behind the long stone and timber table, his sleeves rolled up, dirt smudged on one arm from a half-finished repair. He straightened as Aran entered, alone at first, and then saw Noel enter behind him. His jaw flexed. Aran, he said, I see you brought company. She's not here to lead, or preach, or even fight, Aran said plainly. She's here to work. Quietly. Noel stepped forward, her gaze steady. You don't owe me anything. I know that. But I can train. I can fix things. I know Kirit's tactic inside and out. If there's anything I can give back. Aaron cut in. You've spilled blood with them. Yes, she said. I know. He looked her over, carefully, not as a threat, more as a decision. And then to Aran, he said, Stake your name on her? Aran didn't hesitate. I do. The pause that followed felt like it could fracture. Then Aaron gave a short nod. She doesn't go armed. Not for a while. Someone watches her every hour. We do this my way. Newell nodded once. Understood. Aaron looked at Iran one more time. You'll be her shadow. I know, Iran said. I already am. They gave Newell a corner room in the South Barracks. Plain walls, one bunk, a folded cot, no window. He didn't complain. She stood in the center of the room for a while, looking at nothing. Then finally she said, I expected more yelling. Iran leaned in the doorway, his arms crossed. He's not a man who yells. He reminds me of Jarius, she said softly. I never met him directly, but we all knew what he was like. That gave him pause. He's not the only one, she added. They didn't speak again for a while. When Iran turned to leave, she said, You could have left me in that cell. I know. Why didn't you? He paused at the door. Because Marin didn't. And then he left. Okay. Stretch. All right. The Southern Colony, Eastern Watch Post, a few days later. The wind had picked up again. The tower creaked faintly under its own weight, an old Durasteel frame braced into timber, overlooking the southern trail that disappeared into the woods below. Iran sat on the edge of the high platform, one knee up, the colony stretched below him like a painting half-finished. Tools scattered beside tents, smoke curling from early cook fires, children darting past the sentries. It didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a promise. He'd only been here a few days, but already the rhythm of the colony had begun to settle into him. Patrols, training drills, helping patch a broken generator conduit in silence beside a wiry settler with grease-stained sleeves. He didn't sleep much. He didn't need to. Rest wasn't something he was used to trusting. But for the first time in years, he didn't wake up reaching for a blaster. The comm on his belt chirped, a tight, secure channel. Ethan's voice came through. It's time. Iran stood without hesitation, slipped the comm back to his belt, and began the climb down. Durza Estate, lower communications room, late morning. The room was sealed, soundproof, shielded, and buried into the heart of the mountain. The stone walls still held faint tool marks from Jarius' hand. It was one of the most secure links outside of Catan itself. Marin sat upright in the cushioned chair near the console. She wore a sleeveless tunic and soft cloth wraps under her braces, healing, but still not walking. Her hair was pulled back, her posture straighter than it should have been given the pain in her knees. She didn't flinch. Not when Ethan entered, not when Iran stepped in after him. She was ready. Ethan moved to the console and keyed in a rotating clearance code. 4 layers deep, linked through Proxim encryption and a Katani Marine tactical relay. It took less than a minute. Then the screen lit with a flickering blue hollow of Admiral Connors. He wore his dress blacks, no insignia beyond what protocol required. His face was composed, but not unreadable. He didn't speak right away. Then his eyes landed on Marin. I take it the rumors are true. Marin inclined her head. Yes, sir. I'm alive. Connors didn't blink. Good. His gaze shifted. Ethan, I see they state still holding. His gaze lingered on Iran for a moment. We're adapting, Ethan said. Connors gave a faint grunt of approval. Report. Ethan stepped closer to the comm pickup. 10 days ago, Jedi Knight Marin Durza intercepted a Kirat-Sod signal cluster northeast of the estate. He pursued it alone. It was a trap. 7 operatives, Deathwatch sigils partly obscured, field-grade interrogation equipment, and a false signal bounce key to the Trasinia transponder. Connor's expression darkened. She survived? Clearly. She neutralized two on her own before being restrained, Ethan continued. We arrived in time. Barely. Myself, Aran, and Jared, the attackers, were eliminated. All but one. Name? Naul. Connors paused. Former Deathwatch? Confirmed, sir. And you didn't kill her? No, Aran said, stepping forward. She's under observation. I've placed her under tight restriction in the southern colony. Connor's eyes narrowed. You trust her? No, Aran said evenly, but I believe she wants out, and she's more useful alive than dead. Marin added it after a moment. She gave us a name. Horriban. That the remnants are consolidating there, not aimlessly, strategically. Connor's gaze sharpened. That planet hasn't pinged a traceable signal in nearly 2 years. The Sith presence has gone dark. We think it's more than Sith, Ethan said. Something older. Bevan was only a start. This goes deeper. Connors nodded slowly. I'll escalate the signal to Katani Admiralty, he said, and I'll have Reitman put the Cure on wide-range patrol, cloaked and close. No movement yet. His gaze returned to Marin. You're not to leave the system without notifying me. Understood? Understood, Admiral. Connors gave one final nod, and then quietly, You've done well, all of you, even when I wished you hadn't needed to. The channel closed. Silence lingered. Ethan let out a breath and stepped back from the console. That's the first step. Marin looked towards Aran. Still alright with being visible now at the colony? He nodded. Connors moves will know. I'm where I need to be. She gave a small smile. Then we're both making progress. The light slanted across the ridgeline in slow gold ribbons bleeding into the mist like a half-forgotten dream. From the stone balcony outside the estate's converted war room, the entire northern forest stretched into haze and silence. The world recovering, holding its breath. Marin sat in a high-backed chair brought out for her comfort, both knees braced. She wore a cloak against the chill and had her arms crossed beneath it, not in defiance, but in thought. Ethan stood beside her, silent for the moment. He hadn't spoken since Connors ended the call. He didn't need to. Do you think I would have died if you hadn't followed me? She asked quietly. Ethan let the question hang in the air before answering. No, he said. Why not? Because you're Jarius' daughter. And because you're too criffing stubborn to die for something that stupid. Marin snorted faintly and then winced. Stupid. Yeah. Ethan crouched beside her, resting his arms on the stone ledge. His voice dropped. You know why they keep coming for you? He didn't answer. You're the one who saw through him. Bevan, you knew before the council did, before the command structure did. He has friends, allies, even sympathy from half the Mandalorian diaspora, but you saw what he really was. Her jaw clenched. You tried to stop him in Coruscant, Ethan continued, and he lived. He slipped away into the confusion after the bombing. He faked identities and disappeared into the shadow networks. I know, Marin whispered, her voice brittle. I know he's still out there. Ethan looked at her carefully. He's the one sending them. It's not just about Deathwatch keeping its secrets, it's about you. Because as long as you're alive, he can't rewrite the story. Marin looked away. Horriban, she said, after a moment. They're hiding something there. Ethan nodded grimly. If the Sith are working with what's left of Deathwatch again, it means one of two things. Either they're trying to raise something old, or bury something dangerous. They don't raise things for peace, she muttered. No, Ethan agreed. They don't. She fell quiet, watching the shadows deepen beyond the railing. I've been ordered to stay here, she said, finally. You have? And you agree with that? I do. She didn't argue. She just sighed, deep and tired. I feel like the storm's already started. We're just pretending it's still quiet. Ethan stood again and placed a hand on her shoulder. It is quiet, he said. Right now. And you need that, because when it isn't, when the wave breaks, we'll need you whole. Marin didn't nod, but she didn't protest either. The southern colony watchtower. Haran stood beneath the slowly blinking signal lamp at the edge of the colony perimeter. The calm was silent, but he could feel it, like distant thunder, a war they couldn't see yet, but one they'd already been drafted into. He looked to the horizon, toward the stars where Korriban waited. The royal palace, private comm suite, midday. The comm room was draped in soft light from the latticework windows. Faint birdsong carried in through one open pane. A portrait of the royal family hung above the polished desk. Andrea's husband, Prince Edward de Garmo, beside her in ceremonial attire. But the woman currently in the chair wore a navel-cut tunic with no awards or crown. Her hair was pulled into a simple braid. Her bearing, however, needed no adornment. She was Her Highness Andrea Card de Garmo, and for the first time in days, she had carved out time alone. The console blinked with a priority pulse. She keyed it instantly. Callista's face flickered into view. She looked tired, but alert. Kind of exhaustion that never dulled her clarity. Her outer robe had been shed, and her tunic sleeves were rolled up. She was clearly mid-shift, tending to Marin again. Callista, Andrea said quietly. How is she? She's mending, Callista replied. Stubbornly, slowly. Andrea allowed a faint smile. That sounds familiar. She wanted to walk this morning, Callista added. Ethan told her no. She glared at him for 2 full minutes. That sounds very familiar, Andrea said, her voice softening. But only briefly. Then her tone returned to something closer to the tactician she once was. The attack was confirmed? Callista nodded. 6 Kertzad. They set a trap using the Tracina's transponder. They nearly killed her. Who rescued her? Jared and Ethan. Aran, too. Andrea's brows rose just slightly. He's still close? He was watching, Callista said, and protecting. Andrea studied her old friend for a beat longer. Does Baron know the council will have to be informed? Callista's expression shifted. Not yet. Admiral Connors is aware, but for now she's ordered to stay on Tanagas. Andrea leaned back slightly, her fingers steepled. And if Korriban is what they suspect, then that won't last much longer, and neither will the silence. Andrea exhaled. I trained her after Stefan. She was already broken by the time I saw her, but she carried herself like ice, fire wrapped in ice. I told Edward once if we lived in another age, she'd be a queen, not a knight. Callista's gaze softened. She still could be. She doesn't want power. No, Andrea said. Just purpose. The line went quiet for a moment between them. Then Andrea added, her voice low. I'll start preparing, quietly. My husband trusts me, and my father. He'll listen when I speak. Callista nodded once. Thank you. Andrea paused, and then with sharp precision. When the time comes, I want to be there. You will be, Callista promised. The connection dimmed, the room fell quiet again. Andrea sat alone for a long moment, staring up past the marble arches and gilded trees into the sky beyond. And somewhere in that sky, a war was waking. Righty. How are you, Sniper? Welcome in. Sorry, I was super absorbed in what I was reading. Baton, Mount Adon, the Praxium Gardens. The wind carried a strange stillness down from the peaks. Stefan Card stood on the western terrace of the Praxium, his arms folded behind his back, watching clouds gather in the valley below. His robes stirred faintly in the alpine breeze. The high mountain air was crisp, but even that couldn't explain the tightness in his chest. He'd felt it days ago. He'd hoped, foolishly, that it had been an echo, a memory, a false thread from the past. But it wasn't. He closed his eyes, and there it was again, flickering in the quiet. Pain, not physical, but seared into the force like smoke beneath the skin. Struggle, fear, a refusal to break. Marin's signature. He felt her anger flare and then sharpen into steel. He felt the cables, the blade. Her scream. His jaw tightened. She survived, he said aloud, though no one was near. But at what cost this time? A soft presence moved behind him. Andrea, returning from the palace. She said nothing, only placed a hand on his shoulder. She still walks the edge, Stefan said, even now, still bearing more than we ever asked her to. Andrea nodded, and still choosing not to fall. They stood together as the sun slipped lower behind the spires. Two Jedi who had shaped her, wishing they could shield her from everything to come, but knowing they couldn't. And we're gonna stop there, because we're about to be in an ad again. I will see you guys in a minute and a half. Go get a drink of water. I'm gonna do that. See you in a minute. Alright, guys, welcome back from that ad. I had enough time to get a snack and a drink of water, so hopefully my voice won't be totally scuffed. We'll find out. Let me tell you though, all these male voices are kind of wrecking my voice, so we will find out what happens by the end of stream. I think I'm doing alright so far. On August 5, the Durza estate. In the quiet hours before dawn, Marin sat on the bench beside her window, her knee supported by a stack of cushions. The brace on her left leg itched. The stitches in her right knee ached with every shift of the air. She couldn't walk. Not yet. But she was at least upright. The sky was just beginning to pale, the stars thinning overhead. Somewhere deeper in the house, she heard Callista's quiet movements, Ethan's voice murmuring to Iran over a comm line. The world was still turning. Jared entered without a word, carrying 2 cups of steaming broth. He set one gently on the ledge near her hand and sat beside her without comment. She didn't look at him right away, just sipped. And then, I thought I could control it. The risk. Jared tilted his head. You mean the trap? I mean, me. The need to know, the need to do it alone. She stared down at the fading bruises across her forearms. It's what Bevan wanted. Me, isolated, reckless. He didn't get it, Jared said. I was screaming, she whispered, and part of me still thought that I'd brought it on myself. You didn't, he said. Don't you dare carry that for them. Marin looked at him now, her eyes rimmed red, not from tears but from fatigue she hadn't voiced. You stayed. Of course I did. She reached over, her fingers brushing his hand, just barely. He caught them and held on tightly. I'm scared of what's coming, she said, of what Korriban might be. I know, but you won't face it alone. She looked down at their joined hands, then back to the stars, and for the first time in 2 weeks she let herself breathe. Upper training hall, midday. The hall smelled faintly of pine and dust, fresh air trailing in through the high-arched windows that lined the northern wall. Light spilled across the polished stone floor, catching on the faint scuffs and grooves left by 100 past sparring sessions. The room had once belonged to her father. Now it was hers. Marin stood at the center of the mats that had been placed on the floor, one brace tightened around her left knee, the right leg still stiff beneath loose trousers. She wore no armor, no tunic, just a soft wrap and training trousers. Her hair was tied back, sweat already forming at her temples from the slow, deliberate motions. Jared stood a few paces away, his own stance relaxed, barefoot, his saber clipped to his belt but untouched. They weren't sparring. Not today. Again, he said, quietly. Marin inhaled through her nose, her arms lifted. She shifted weight up to her left leg, turning through a defensive sweep with her right, one she'd practiced since she was 12. This time, her balance faltered. Jared caught her elbow before she could fall. Too much weight too early, he said, gently. You anticipated pain, so you sped the motion. Marin grimaced. I know. Don't push through it, he said. Adjust. Flow with what your body's telling you. She nodded and stepped back, rolling her shoulders. They tried again. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Every movement was slow, intentional. Jared corrected her with a touch to her shoulder, a faint shift of his hand. When she favored her left side too heavily, he stepped in, not to lecture, but to mirror. He moved with her and let her pace set the rhythm. Eventually they stood side by side, moving in unison, breath to breath, a kata sequence stripped to its bones. Better, Jared said, breaking the silence after a pause. You're not fighting the injury anymore. You're listening to it. I hate that I have to, she said, under her breath. You don't heal by pretending nothing happened. You heal by owning that it did. She didn't reply right away, just let the next movement carry her forward. And then softly she said, This helps. He looked over. You being here, she added. This reminds me. Jared studied her. Her shoulders were squared, her breath measured, hair loose at the nape of her neck. Of what? He asked. She turned to him fully and met his gaze. That I'm still me. Jared smiled, small but real. Good, because that's who I came back for. The hallway outside the upper training hall. The sound of soft footwork echoed from within. Measured movements, slow breathing, the light scrape of skin over polished stone. No grunts, no saber strikes, just a quiet rhythm, fragile but steady. Ethan was leaned against the stone archway, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. Callista stood beside him, her robe sleeves rolled up past the elbows, a datapad in hand. She wasn't reading it. Her eyes were fixed on the pair inside the training hall beyond. Marin moved carefully across the floor, her posture low and focused. Jared matched her, offering no corrections now, just presence. Support. He didn't hover. He walked with her. She asked for this? Callista murmured. Ethan nodded. Didn't demand, just said she was ready to try. Callista let out a breath, equal parts tension and relief. She never lets herself rest for long. She can't, Ethan said. It's not in her. Not really. They watched in silence for another moment. She's still favoring the left, Callista noted. She will for a while. But her balance is coming back, Ethan replied. Callista glanced up at him. And the rest of her? Ethan's gaze lingered on Marin, now pausing between forms, wiping sweat from her forehead, jaw tight but determined. She's quieter, he said. Not shut down, just older. Like she knows the next blow's coming and she's already bracing for it. Callista folded her arms across her data pad. She's still waiting for the galaxy to punish her for surviving. She was a child when it started, Ethan said, his voice low. They didn't care. Bevan didn't care. Sith didn't care. Every time she climbed back to her feet, they made sure someone was there to knock her down again. Callista's fingers tightened against the data pad she held. And yet she keeps getting up. Yeah, Ethan said, his voice softening. That's what scares them. The two inside the hall shifted into the final stance. Marin upright, her weight centered, her gaze steady. Jared nodded once and stepped back, giving her the space. For a moment, she stood alone in the center of the floor, her back straight. Despite the brace, her chin lifted just slightly. Callista spoke quietly. She's becoming who Jared hoped she would be. Ethan didn't answer. His eyes didn't leave Marin. Alrighty. Marin's room, late evening. Fire in the wall hearth had burned low, casting warm orange shadows against the stone. Outside, the mountain wind whispered through the tall pines, brushing against the glass, in steady rhythm. Marin sat on the edge of her bed, wrapped in a soft tunic. One leg stretched out in front of her, the brace loosened. Her hair had come undone from its tie, and a datapad lay forgotten on the table beside her. A mug of bee-hot sat untouched, long since gone cold. She didn't hear the door open, but she knew who it was the moment the silence changed. Callista stepped inside, carrying a blanket draped over one arm. She paused only briefly, then crossed the room and draped it over Marin's shoulders without a word. Marin exhaled slowly. I didn't expect anyone. Callista settled beside her, not close enough to crowd, but near enough to share the space. I could say the same about you, Callista murmured. But you were on your feet in the training hall today. Wasn't much, Marin said softly. It was enough. Silence lingered again, and then Marin said, I keep thinking, if I moved just a little better, I could get through the whole form without needing Jared's help. Maybe that meant I was past it. Pain doesn't work like that, Callista said, and neither does trauma. Marin looked down at her hands, her fingers flexing against the edge of the blanket. Then what does? Callista tilted her head, thinking. Time, trust, the willingness to stop judging yourself by how fast you recover. That's hard, Marin whispered. I know. Marin's eyes drifted toward the hearth. I hear my father sometimes, she said, almost inaudibly. Not voices, just memories. The way he used to walk through the hall at night. The smell of metal polish, the weight of his presence when he stood beside me. It's like he's still here, in the walls. Callista listened. She didn't interrupt. Marin went on, her voice quieter still. I wonder if I'm doing any of this right, if I'm honoring him, or if I'm just chasing ghosts. Callista reached out and gently took Marin's hand. You're not chasing anything. You're becoming. Marin looked at her, her eyes rimmed with the exhaustion she never let anyone see. I'm scared of what's waiting, she said. Orban, Bevan. You're allowed to be scared, Callista said. But you're not alone. You never were. Marin squeezed her hand once and then let go. The room was quiet again, and Callista stayed, sitting beside her long after Marin lay back against the pillows, cloak still wrapped around her shoulders, not as a Jedi, not as a warrior, but as someone who loved her like a daughter. Catan, the royal residence. Nightfall. Andrea stood on the palace veranda just beyond the glass doors of the study, watching the city lights flicker in the valley below. The air was crisp, perfumed by the spring blossoms from the manicured gardens that wound beneath the terraces, but her eyes were on the sky, on the cold stars burning above the peaks. Edward approached from behind her, quiet-footed despite his ceremonial footwear. "You've been distant all evening," he said, gently. Andrea didn't turn. "I've been watching." He stepped beside her, his voice lowered. "Still nothing from your father?" "Single message. He knows Marin was hurt. That's all." Edward rested a hand lightly on the railing next to her. "And what do you know?" Andrea exhaled slowly. That something broke loose again the moment she touched the Trasinia. That we're weeks, days maybe, from another shift. That the Sith are no longer moving in secret, and Deathwatch was never acting alone. "You think this was a test?" "I know it was." Her voice was quiet but sharp. "A message. A warning. Or a lure." Edward studied her. "She's not ready to fight again." "No," Andrea said, "but she will. And when she does, she'll need more than just warriors. She'll need witnesses. People who remember who she is before the galaxy tries to rewrite her again." Edward reached for her hand and found it cold. "She's like you," he said. "You see the storm before anyone else." Andrea's jaw tightened. "She's stronger than I ever was." She turned then, finally meeting his gaze. "Have the archive stewards prepare my files and bring me the last batch of Praxian reports. Stefan's too. I want everything on Catan locked down if this escalates." "You're not going to the council?" "Not yet," Andrea said. "Not until she calls." On August 5, the Durza estate. The room had gone still. Fire was ash. A thin breeze whispered through the barely cracked window, fluttering the edge of the curtain. Marin slept, but only just. Her body was still. Her breath was shallow, but the force had begun to shift around her, curling like smoke across her senses. And then, without warning, she was standing. Not in her bed, not even in her room, but beneath the trees. The forest around her was dense and silent, bathed in silver-blue mist. The air held weight, as if the world were waiting for something unspeakable to stir. She wore no armor, no saber hung at her hip. She looked down at her hands and saw only light. She turned, and behind her stood the Trasinia, cold and silent beneath the canopy. The transponder was lit, but it wasn't a ship anymore. It was a mausoleum. She stepped forward. Then, movement. A shadow slipped between the trees. Not a person. Not even Deathwatch. Something older. A shape wrapped in ancient cloth and armor unlike any she recognized, standing among the stone pillars of a ruined Catani arch. Its voice was not a voice. "She carries the flame, but does she know what it burns?" Marin took a step back, but found her feet wouldn't move. "I know who I am," she said. "You knew," it echoed. "The shadow remembers more than you do." Hello, coffee crystals. Welcome in. The mist surged. The forest blurred, and suddenly the figure stood inches from her. Its face was hidden. Its eyes. Hers. "Will you be strong enough when the last secret is revealed?" The shuriken pain flared again in her knee, real and imagined. She collapsed to one side. Woke. Her heart was pounding. The room was still dark, but the wind outside had risen. The sigil of her family, etched into the stone above the hearth, caught the first thread of starlight. And beneath the blanket at her side, her fingers curled around something that hadn't been there before. A small blackened ring of durasteel, scored with 3 faint, perfect grooves. I know, I caught that. Every once in a while, it's totally on point. only 8:30. Maybe I'll get through. Maybe I'll get through another chapter. Find out. I swear I made these chapters longer, but I mean, please tell me if I'm reading too fast. I'm really trying not to. Let's scroll back up and read it. That's actually a pretty good one. Chapter 18. The desert estate. The outer balcony, just before dawn. The wind curled softly across the balcony's high stone ledge, rustling against Jared's robes as he sat in stillness beneath the stars. The forest of Tanaga stretched into the black, moonlight glinting off the snow-capped peaks far to the north. He heard the rustle of the trees, the whisper of air, the slow, even breath that had come only after long effort. His lightsaber rested beside him, inert. His eyes were closed. But the force was not still. There was something beneath the current now, a hum just out of pitch, a note too low to hear but too deep to ignore. He breathed into it, reached, listened, and then the stars blinked out. He stood at the edge of a high ridge, his feet not on stone, but on something else. Smooth and cold. Not metal, not earth, something polished by time and unnatural wind. A world lay stretched below him. Not Tanagas, not Korriban. Unknown. Ash drifted in the air like falling snow, and the sky above was wrong. A dusky violet, too pale, with no moon and no sun. The horizon glowed faintly, pulsing every few seconds as if the planet itself had a heartbeat. The ridge fell away to reveal a massive basin, circular, symmetrical, and impossibly vast. At its center was a sunken platform grown from the ground. It was surrounded by 12 towering statues, each one facing inward. Their faces were eroded to smoothness. Their stances knelt or bowed, not in reverence, but in submission. And at the center of the circle, there was a figure, kneeling and still. Jared moved forward, but the world did not move with him. His steps made no sound, no breeze touched him. The force was guiding him not through space, but memory, for a place so soaked in intent it still lived long after its time had passed. As he drew closer to the platform, he saw more. The kneeling figure was bound at the wrist by threads of light, not mechanical, not even metal. Force weave, ritual binding, and standing behind the kneeling figure, just out of reach, was a second presence. A tall form in layered cloth and faded armor, without a face, without a voice. In their outstretched hand they held a lightsaber, long and simple. No phalanges, no emblems, 3 perfect grooves etched around the grip. The blade was not lit, but Jared knew its color. White. To carry the flame was to be known by shadow. The voice came from nowhere, and everywhere. The kneeling figure raised its head. It was Marin, older, paler. Her face was tired but calm. A long scar marked her cheek. Her eyes met Jared's, not in surprise, but in recognition, like she'd been waiting for him. He tried to call her name, but the wind rose, the lights dimmed. Force pulled. Jared's breath hitched. He gasped, his eyes snapping open. The stars returned above him, their cold light uncaring. His palms were trembling where they rested against his knees. The saber beside him had rolled ever so slightly toward his thigh, as if drawn to him by unseen gravity. He sat still for a long time, listening, feeling, and for the first time in many weeks he felt cold. Not from fear, but from knowing. Something had chosen her, and whether it was the Force or something far older, it would come calling again. Soon. The mountain sun crept slowly over the pines, casting long beams through the carved windows of the estate. The hallway smelled faintly of morning tea and wood smoke. The quiet felt heavier today, as if the house itself had taken a breath and not yet released it. Callista stood at the hearth, her arms folded. She hadn't slept. Jared was still on the balcony, silent since his return from meditation. He hadn't spoken a word after re-entering the estate, just nodded to her once, his eyes shadowed with thought. That alone had unsettled her. He was rarely unreadable. And now he was a closed door. Ethan stepped softly into Marin's room, his boots muffled by the woven rug. Marin lay on her side beneath the blanket, propped up slightly on a stack of pillows. Her eyes were closed, but not in sleep. "You're awake," he said. Marin nodded faintly. "I didn't rest much." He approached her bed, glancing down at her knees. The swelling had subsided, but the bandages were fresh. Callista had dressed them again herself, and the faint scent of bacta and herbs lingered in the room. "How's the pain?" Marin gave a tight shrug. "Dull. Present." "Typical of you to rate that as progress." His tone softened, but he didn't quite joke. "You're not cleared to walk yet." "I know," she exhaled. "I don't want to." Ethan frowned faintly. "Bad dreams again?" "Not dreams," she said, her brow furrowed. "Something shifted. I felt it this morning. Not in me. In Jared." Ethan looked towards the door and the balcony beyond. "He's been quiet," Marin murmured. "But something's different. Like he's already seen something I haven't yet. Like he's waiting." You've always been strong in sensing that," Ethan said quietly. "People shifting around you even before they realize it themselves." "I think it's more than him." Marin's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think something's calling, like it used to when I was little, when I dream about places I hadn't even seen yet." She looked up at him. "And it's familiar." Ethan didn't respond. Not yet. He rested a hand gently on her shoulder. "Let me talk to Callista. You're not the only one feeling the tide change." Callista turned from the balcony railing before Ethan reached her. She was already watching the mountain. "He's not going to speak about it," she said. "Not right away." Ethan nodded. "He saw something?" Callista's expression was grim. The moment he came back inside, the force around him was different. Deepened, like he'd brushed against something ancient and left a mark on himself. Ethan let that sit between them. Marin felt it too. Of course she did. She always feels it, she just doesn't understand why, yet. Baton, mounted on Praxium, the same morning. Stefan Card stood in the high meditation chamber at the summit, overlooking the pale clouds drifting between the ridgelines. The chamber was quiet and empty, but the wind beyond the stone arches carried a ripple. Not weather. The force. He placed one palm on the smooth stone wall and then closed his eyes. The ring, the circle of statues, Marin, kneeling, the white saber. Stefan breathed in through his nose, slow and steady. The mountain whispered nothing in words, but the warning was clear. He turned towards the stairwell. "Andrea," he called softly into the calm. Her voice answered seconds later, firm and alert. "You felt it." "She's walking towards something that was never meant to be reopened," he said. "And Jared just saw it too." Andrea didn't hesitate. "I'll keep the palace quiet, but I want every map we have of unexplored systems near the rift sectors. If anything ties to the Katani pre-Jedi archives, we find it." Stefan nodded once. "I'll expect Jared to reach out." Back on Tanagus that afternoon. Marin sat in the chair by the window, her legs wrapped in blankets, hands folded loosely in her lap. She stared home, where the ring had been. It was locked away now in the shrine, but she still felt it in her hand. Like it had been an echo. Jared entered quietly behind her, saying nothing. She didn't turn, but her voice was calm and clear. "You saw it too, didn't you?" There was a pause. silence between them, and then he said simply, "Yes." I need to stretch, guys. We have an ad starting in just a minute. The Dursa estate, shrine to the lady, early morning. The candlelight flickered low against the grey stone walls. Marin sat cross-legged before the statue in the niche. The lady, carved by Jerry's hand, her features worn smooth with time and reverence. Marin's brace was still on. She dropped a shawl over her shoulders, more for grounding than for warmth. In her hands, she held the ring. Small, heavy for its size, burnished black, but when the firelight struck just right, the three grooves caught the glow. Faint silver threaded deep in the scoring. She hadn't spoken since lighting the candles. Jared sat quietly behind her, not watching her, watching the flame and holding silence like a shield. Stefan placed slowly in the background, one hand on his chin. I'm gonna stop right there, because we're about to be in an ad again. I'm gonna take a break, get myself some water, and I will see you guys in a minute and a half. Go have a stretch, get a drink, get a snack, whatever you need, and I will see you guys in a minute and a half. Alright, we are back from that ad. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Give me a chance to get a drink of water, get a snack, and we're gonna jump right back in. If anybody, of course, has questions or comments or would like to do your daily vocabulary, let me know. Be happy to take a pause, give my reading voice a break for a minute. Male voices are tough. Callista leaned against the archway. Andrea's image flickered quietly above the portable holocom, her royal attire replaced by old Jedi robes. She had insisted on listening, even if she couldn't yet come. Marin finally spoke. It was in my hand when I awoke. She didn't look at them, just the ring. I jumped of the forest of the Trasinia, but it wasn't the ship. It was older, hollow, like a warning. Stefan stopped pacing. Describe it. The forest was watching. There was a figure, cloaked, a priest or a sentinel. It had my eyes. She hesitated. It said I carried the flame, but I didn't know what it burned. Andrea exhaled sharply from the holocom. That's Batani, ancient, from the Northern Scrolls. Flame that burns and binds. The symbol of both sacrifice and legacy. And lineage, Stefan added. Jared shifted then, finally speaking since they'd entered the room. She built her saber with that design later, said quietly. 3 grooves, no ornament, clean, like it always meant something. They turned to look at him, incredulous. Marin blinked. What did you say? I've seen it, he said. Not clearly, not yet, but the Force tells me things, in dreams and in echoes. Callista's brow furrowed. Even I haven't felt that vision. Jared didn't flinch, because I'm not just looking for what's wrong. I'm listening for what wants to be born. Mare looked down at the ring again, her breath shallow. It feels like my father, she whispered. Like something he touched, maybe even made. Stefan stepped forward and then knelt across from her. He trained with me at the Praxium before he left. He was drawn to the old teachings, the ones that predate even our archives. He might have found something deeper, something tied to the first flame. Under his voice returned, quieter now. It would explain how he balanced it all, how he taught you to. Marin ran a thumb across the grooves in the ring. So, what is it? Jared met her gaze. I think it's a key, not to a place, but to you. Silence settled again, but the air had shifted. Outside, the wind picked up just slightly, rustling the pine boughs beyond the shrine walls. Something in Marin's path had begun to glow, pale ember buried in ash. And one day, soon, it would burn. The sun angled through the wide windows, painting warm gold across the floor of the training hall. The stone had been warmed by the midday heat, and Marin sat on it now, bracing one hand behind her while the other rested on her cane. She was out of breath. Again. Jared stood a short distance away, arms loosely folded, watching her with quiet patience. That's 3, Marin muttered. Jared offered a small smile. Better than 2. Eat this, she snapped, then immediately closed her eyes, steadying her tone. Sorry, I hate being not able to move. You're allowed to hate it, he said gently. That doesn't make it permanent. She shifted, testing her weight with a wince. It feels permanent. Jared didn't argue. He walked to her side instead and lowered himself to the floor beside her. You're not failing, he said. You're recovering. That's different. She didn't look at him. I should be stronger than this, she said. You are stronger than this. That's why you're still here. That made her pause. He leaned back against the stone pillar behind them. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not to me, not to Ethan, not even to yourself. She looked down at her knees. But I want to. Jared tilted his head slightly. Why? Marin was quiet for a long time. The sounds of the estate moved faintly around them. Wind outside, a door creaking opened somewhere in the east wing. Finally, she answered. Because something is coming. I don't know what, but I can feel it, Jared. It's like the ground's waiting to break open beneath us, and I won't be ready when it does. Jared's expression softened, but his voice remained even. Then we stand on the edge together. She finally looked at him. He held her gaze, calm and steady. You don't have to face what's coming alone. The words sank deep, not just into her mind, but through the ache in her limbs and the thrum of the force around her. For a moment, Marin let her head rest lightly against his shoulder, her eyes closed. They sat like that for a while, and though neither of them said it, they both knew this peace, this moment, would not last forever. But for now, it was enough. Southern Colony. Late afternoon. The wind was soft as it rolled across the cliffs. The colony sat nestled into the stone like it had always belonged there, weathered, practical and enduring. Ren sat atop one of the low watch platforms, his boots braced against the railing, his arms draped over his knees. He had taken to watching the horizon in the late hours. The rhythm of it reminded him that the world hadn't ended. Survival wasn't always a war. Below, Naul moved quietly across the training yard. She was alone, armed only with a practice staff and hurled instincts. Ren watched as she flowed through a defensive pattern he hadn't seen in years. It was efficient, brutal, and exact. She hadn't lost her edge, but she was holding something back. He descended without a word, his boots quiet on the stone steps. When he reached the edge of the yard, he leaned against one of the stone pillars, his arms folded. "You're using the old drills," he said. "Hey, Lord! Welcome in!" Noel didn't stop moving. They worked for the Kurtzad. That made her pause. Not stop, but pause. She exhaled, spun the staff one last time, and let it rest against the ground. "I haven't figured out new ones yet," she said. "And maybe it's time." Noel turned to face him, her eyes, dark, sharp, and tired, met his without flinching. "Think that's why I'm here?" he asked. "Change?" Aran's answer was soft. "No, I think you're here because you don't know what else to be." That landed, harder than he intended. She looked away, her jaw clenched. Easier to fight. It was. He stepped closer. It won't be now. Elsewhere in the colony, Aaron's office. Sorry, I've got guys' names are too close. The colony administrator stood at the wide desk built into the wall of his study. Data pads arrayed before him, but none active. He was staring through the window, northward, towards the mountains. He did that often now. "What are you guys doing in chat over there?" There we go. The comm link beside him lit up with a soft chime. He tapped it once. "Go ahead." Ethan's voice filtered through, calm but lined with fatigue. "She's resting. Still slow, but she stood twice today." Aaron allowed the faintest smile. "Thank you. Don't tell her I asked." "I never do." There was a pause. "She'll be ready when it matters," Ethan added quietly. Aaron nodded to the empty room. "I know, but I'll keep watching anyway." He closed the channel and turned his gaze back toward the peaks beyond. Marin's dream. The world around her was silver and blue, not cold, but still, like a place between breath and silence. She stood barefoot in a shallow pool, the water glass smooth beneath her. She wore no armor, no cloak, just a simple tunic, pale as ash. Her reflection in the water was slightly blurred, but behind it stood another form. She turned. Rinius. He looked younger somehow, not the composed warrior she'd come to rely on during missions, but something more uncertain. His cloak was gone. He wore only a vest and arm guards, his hair slightly damp, his eyes far away. She called his name, but he didn't answer. Instead, he turned, began to walk across the water's surface. "A dream," she whispered. "This is a dream." But her feet moved anyway, and she followed. He led her through a corridor of forgotten places. She saw the Praxium echoing with children's laughter. She saw the shrine again, flickering with candlelight. Then further still, to a world she didn't recognize. A deep forest. Not Nagas. Older. The trees pulsed faintly with the force like veins pulsing beneath the skin. In the distance, a flicker of white cloth, and then gone. A girl's laughter, half mournful, half hopeful. A name drifted to her. Ariana. Force tightened around her. She turned to Rinius again. He looked conflicted, like a man who carried a burden he didn't yet know how to put down. In his hand, she glimpsed a scrap of parchment, faded, fraying. etched with what looked like coordinates. And then he was gone. And in his place stood Stefan, older, weathered, cloaked in gray and deep blue. He did not speak, but his hand extended, open towards her. And in his palm was a second saber. Her saber. The one she had not built yet. Marin reached for it and woke up. Her breath came quickly, chest rising and falling beneath the sheets. Pain whispered through her knees as she sat up, bracing herself on the bed frame. Jared stirred from the chair nearby, but didn't rise. Another dream? She nodded. It was Rhinius. Jared exhaled. I felt the shift in him lately, quiet, focused, like he's searching for something. He is, she said. Her, Ariana. Jared tilted his head. You know what happened to her? Marin shook her head. Not yet. She later recounted the dream in fragments, the water, the coordinates, the feeling of choice, Stefan offering her a path. Callista was silent through most of it. Ethan, however, frowned. He hasn't asked yet, he said, but he will. And I want to go, Marin said quietly. You're not ready. Marin didn't argue, but her jaw set. She's not ready, Ethan repeated, this time more to himself than anyone else in the room. Callista finally spoke. But she will be. Ethan looked at her. You saw the same things in her I did, Callista said, even when you tried to protect her from it. I still want to protect her, and that's why she's still alive. Callista turned to Marin. But when Stefan calls, you must choose. No one can make that choice for you. Marin looked down at her hands. They were steady now. Not whole, but steady. The light through the west-facing windows was softer now, touched with gold. The kind of light that made everything seem quieter than it really was. Marin sat on the edge of her bed, her hands braced against the blanket. Her legs dangled just above the floor, still wrapped, still aching. The cane leaned within reach, but she hadn't touched it in over an hour. Ethan stood by the open window, his arms crossed, watching the sky, but not really seeing it. I keep thinking I'll wake up and it'll be better, Marin said. Her voice was low, not bitter, but quiet, like she was afraid saying it aloud would make the truth settle deeper. I know, Ethan replied, not turning from the window. I hate this part. Now he did turn. His face softened, but not into pity. Never that. Just the weight of someone who'd seen it too many times, who'd lived it. I once spent 3 weeks on my back after a shrapnel blast tore through my ribs, he said. Didn't even breathe right until week 4. He raised an eyebrow. You've been sitting on that story this whole time? You weren't ready to hear it. I'm ready now. He stepped forward, but didn't sit. You think you're ready. That's not the same thing. I had a dream, she said, about Rhinius and Stefan. He exhaled once. You told me. He's going to ask me to go with him, to find her. Ariana, Ethan murmured. Ethan looked down at her legs, at the stiffness she hated so much. You can't walk without help, he said, bluntly. I know. If something goes wrong, if you have to run, I won't be alone, she said. I'll have Rhinius, and if Stefan's asking, it means he trusts I'm ready. I trained you, Ethan said, not Stefan. I know what you can do and what you can't. Marin looked away. Then tell me I'll never be ready. The words landed. Ethan closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, his voice had lost its edge. I want to say that, he admitted. I want to lock every door and keep you here until your legs work and the war ends. But that's not how this works, she finished. No, it isn't. There was a long silence. Then Ethan stepped closer, crouching in front of her, and gently placed a hand over her knees, careful of the bandages and the bruises. When the time comes and you do go, he said, You walk out of this house with my blessing, not my doubt. Marin nodded once. And until then? Ethan met her eyes. You walk. Even if it hurts. Even if you need the cane. Every day. Because when Stefan calls, I want you to answer without hesitation. A breath caught in her throat. I'll try, she whispered. Good, he said. Because that's all I ever asked of you. Actually, I might actually finish this right at 9. Maybe. We'll see. The Durza estate. 2 nights later. The halls were quiet. The estate slept beneath the husk of a mountain wind and ever-watchful stars beneath the high windows. Marin stood alone at the far end of the corridor outside the training hall, one hand resting on the smooth stone wall for balance. Her cane trembled slightly where it hovered inches from the floor. She was breathing carefully, her movement controlled and measured. Sweat beaded lightly at her temple despite the cool night air. She hadn't told anyone she was trying this tonight, except Jared. He stood several paces away, saying nothing, not touching, just there. She took 1 step. It was clumsy. Her left knee buckled slightly and she caught herself before it collapsed. She paused, drew in a breath, focused. Another step, then another. The hallway stretched long and uneven ahead of her, but Jared didn't move. He didn't close the distance, he just waited, letting her find the pace. I'm not used to feeling this fragile, she said through gritted teeth. You're not fragile, he replied. You're mending. Feels like the same thing. It isn't. She stepped again, and then again. By the time she reached him, her breathing was shallow, her grip white-knuckled around the cane. But she was upright, on her own, and her eyes were locked on his. I made it, she said softly. Jared offered a faint, proud smile. I know. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that Ethan stood just beyond the archway, arms folded, silent in the shadows beyond. He hadn't intended to spy. He'd only come to check the hallway sensors out of habit. But when he saw her, saw the effort in every muscle of her frame, saw the way Jared didn't help, didn't need to help, he stayed. And for the first time since the clearing, something in him eased. He wasn't ready for a battlefield. Not yet. She was fighting her way back, step by slow step. The wind had died down by the time Ethan slipped out onto the balcony. The sky stretched dark above the estate, stars distant beyond the clouds. He stood with his hands braced on the railing, his head bowed, as though the mountain itself might give him answers. Behind him, the door creaked open. He didn't turn. I saw you leave, Callista said softly. I wasn't trying to hide it. I know. She stepped up beside him, folding her arms against the chill. For a long moment, neither spoke. She walked, and said finally. Callista turned her head. Alone? With Jared nearby, but yes. He exhaled slowly. Breath shook more than he liked. She made it to him, pain in one hand, pain in every step, but she didn't stop. Callista didn't speak. She just let it settle between them. She's going to go, he added, when Stefan asks. She'll say yes. Callista tilted her head slightly. Will you let her? Ethan didn't answer right away, his hands curled tight around the railing. She's not whole, he said. Not yet. But she's healing. He looked at her then, really looked. The lines around his eyes a little deeper than last year, the fatigue of command, of guardianship, of love, etched into every movement. She still wakes up in pain, he said. Still flinches when you or I change her bandages, and I'm supposed to let her chase ghosts across the stars? No, Callista said gently. You're supposed to trust that you raised her to survive it. His jaw clenched. I didn't raise her. Jarius did. And when Jarius died, you picked up the pieces, she said softly. Don't pretend that didn't matter. You trained her, Ethan. You bled beside her. You stood between her and the worst of it. And now? She touched his hand where it gripped the railing. Now she's standing. That silenced him. Calista leaned her head against his shoulder. Let her go, she said. Not yet. Not tomorrow, but when the time comes, let her choose. Ethan nodded slowly. I just hope that the galaxy doesn't ask more of her than she has left to give. Calista's voice was soft, but resolute. It will. And after a long pause, she added, but she'll give it anyway. And I'm actually gonna stop there. Because I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Oh. Thank you guys for being here with me this evening. I really hope that you enjoyed the story. I know it's definitely had its ups and downs, but it's good. We are a good portion of the way into the rewrite that I had been working on, so I'm really hoping that you guys like the story as it is now. I feel like all the work that I did actually has made it a lot deeper. There's a lot more going, emotionally going on for Marin, and I think it really did the story and her arc as a whole some justice. And I'm still working on some of the other stories. I have 2 stories that actually take place after steps in the past that I'm in the process that are kind of drafted, but I haven't really made much progress beyond that. Currently finishing out the rewrite on To Honor the Departed, and then I will probably tackle a bit of a rework for Age of Darkness to kind of line up with everything else. Yeah. Take a real quick look at... Oh no. Alright. Right. Yes, I'm just checking the schedule again. I know, it really is. Hi, Cyan, welcome in. Right here at the end, yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm basically taking her entire arc and reworking it kind of one story at a time. The Warrior's Heart is basically done. It's reposted over on Archive of Our Own, as is Train Your Daughter. Steps in the Past is officially complete, but I may go in and do some editing for story flow. And then I have the 2 later stories as well. I know. It really is. But I'm really happy with how the story has kind of evolved with the rewrite. I feel like, especially with Train Your Daughter, which is the biggest story to date, honestly. It started out originally at like 30 chapters. It's now 46 as it's published on Archive of Our Own, so I added a whole bunch of stuff that covers her early training with Jarius in the 6 years between when he finds her and when she goes to the Praxium on Catan, because I felt that it was really important to kind of delve into that a little bit and deepen their relationship. So I'm finding ways to add more to the story in ways that are impactful, and I think that that's really important. I feel like, especially for Marin, that relationships are really important for her story. And the relationship that she had with her father was pretty pivotal to who she was, or who she is, I should say. So I'm, yes, but always refine, edit. That's the life of any writer. But I'm really having a blast. As much work as it is, I'm really enjoying it, and it's actually giving me a chance to actually develop a lot of lore for the Katani people. The Katani culture was actually created, oh, probably more than 25 years ago by somebody I used to write with back when I was writing cooperatively. It's kind of a a mixture of, let's see, Japanese, Jedi, Mandalorian, and a few other things that I can't recall. Yeah, yeah, I'm actually having a really good time reworking the stories and revisiting them, and I've been able to actually develop a lot of lore for the Katani people, but also specifically for Marin and how that kind of plays into who she is as a person. You know, it's been really fun for me to kind of dig into that. We're about to be in an ad, so I'm gonna go get some water, and I will see you guys in a minute and a half. Right, we are back from that ad. Thanks for hanging out. Um, oh yes, sorry, I had to remind myself what I was talking about. But yes, Cyan, you make a good point. Don't overload yourself. But I'm forever refining, and honestly, it's been really interesting to revisit these stories because some of them are 20, 25 years old. So I'm dating myself a little bit. But I'm really enjoying being able to revisit the stories and enrich them and you know, add more to them. I'm really trying to not, you know, embellish their characters too much. My main focus is on Marin and her story, so everybody else is just kind of supporting characters. um, but I'm really, like I said, I'm really enjoying the opportunity and the fact that I have the muse to do this. Very funny. No, I was actually 17. Yeah, I was actually like I was in high school, so I was like 17. Um, it's I'm really dating myself. It feels like forever, honestly. Alright, I'm going to see if there's somebody we can go say hi to for the evening. Oh yeah. That's right, Lord. I remember that. Thanks, Cyan. I appreciate you being here and everybody else, even if you were just in lurk mode. That's kind of what the stream is for. It is designed to be lurker friendly, especially the reading streams. I go say hi to. Don't get me started. See, that's one reason why I kept writing my own, was because everybody I knew outside of my little group of writers, everybody was so stuck on lore. It had to be lore accurate. I'm like, I don't care. Like, let me play in my little corner of the universe. Okay? Let's see. Yeah, some people get really, bent out of shape about lore. Let's see. I'm going to... You know what? We're gonna go say hi to... I know, yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing with the stories that you know that we started writing cooperatively back when I was in high school. When by the time I came in, they had already been writing as a group for probably 4 or 5 years. I know, right? and yet here we are over in our little corner of the universe. We have planets that we've made. We have cultures that we've made. I'm actually like creating a full-on language for, well, not complete language, but partial language for it. And a bunch of lore. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. But I've always been of the opinion, at least with my stories, that you shouldn't allow canon to define you. If you want to write, use it as a starting point, and that's what we did. Like, by the time that we were writing our stories, I don't even think the Swarm Wars books were written yet at that point. But everything, you know, that happened in universe up to that point, we treated as canon, that it actually happened. But beyond that, we kind of went our own way. Yeah, I gotta have a little fun. Okay. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I do hope that you were able to stay cool and find some chill vibes. And I hope that you have an awesome rest of your week. Take care of yourselves. Please stay hydrated. Let's go show some love to Mega Queen. She is a fellow member of Survivor Squad. And I haven't rated her in a while, so I just want to go over and say hi. Hang out in her stream for a little bit. Let me, give me just 1 second while I get that set up. Okay. Yes, food is important. Food and hydration are very important. Very, very important. Alrighty. Thank you guys. I will see you again on Wednesday, officially next week. I may potentially be streaming again on Sunday to read some more. It depends on how I'm feeling. But I will definitely see you guys on Wednesday for some SWTOR shenanigans. Have an awesome week. And I will see you on the next day. Thanks guys. Have a great night. Bye-bye.